most of the kids, I don't think necessarily have that bank of memories to kind of pull from. But what I do in the show is I tap into the parents' memories of when they were kids.
I'm Mignon Fogarty. Welcome to the Thursday show where we talk to people doing interesting things with language. Today, we're going to talk about the child storytelling voice with Doug Fraser, host and creator of the Cozy Critters podcast. Doug is a lifelong language lover and is producing this fabulous show that's received all sorts of accolades from everyone from parents to sleep researchers. Doug Fraser, better known as Dougie Pickles, welcome to the Grammar Girl podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's great to see you too. Doug, I was thinking about the language, and one of the first things kids hear when they're listening to the show is that, you are Dougie Pickles. And that pickles is just a funny word, sort of according to the rules of comedy. Is that why you chose that name?
Yeah, the name started out that way, where I wanted something a little silly. And for me, when food is a part of a name, there's always something funny about it. And once I came up with Dougie Pickles, I was like, I wonder if that's just came to my head or if there's something there. And then I realized that I think it may be an old memory from Rugrats, which is an
Oh.
old cartoon. And one of the lead characters was Tommy Pickles.
Oh,
Yeah.
I never watched that show, so I did not know that.
Yeah. As a 90s kid, it was on TV quite a lot in our house.
Huh. Well, there's something to be said, in fiction, they talk about resonance, which is calling back to things that people used to love or have fond memories of. So I guess you've got some resonance going there.
Absolutely. Yeah. I didn't know that was a word for that. So I'm going to keep that in my pocket.
Yeah, and I mean, just also popped into the top of my head is that kids don't have resonance, do they? Or do they? Are you putting things in the show to call back fond memories of kids? Or are they too young to have fond memories that you can take advantage of that way in storytelling?
It's kind of tricky, right? Because the age range of the show, our youngest reader was about just before 2 years old. And then our oldest listener, I think, that I've gotten data for is about 12.
Mhm.
And so, at 12, you've got plenty of memories to kind of look back on, and you can wax nostalgia for your kindergarten years or whatever it is. But yeah, most of the kids, I don't think necessarily have that bank of memories to kind of pull from. But what I do in the show is I tap into the parents' memories of when they were kids. And the way that I like to think about the show is originally the idea was I wanted Blue Planet meets the Magic School Bus in
Mhm.
terms of language, in terms of feeling. And as it started evolving, I was like, I also want a bit of Bluey in there as well. And have you ever seen Bluey before?
No.
Oh, you're missing out. It's a great show. The reason I got into it is there was these viral clips of parents crying when they saw a particular episode of Bluey. And I was like, man, I gotta see what's going on here. And I watched the episode they were talking about, and I cried too. And it was all about growing up. And it's if I remember correctly, one of the characters kept wanting to sleep in their parents' bedroom, and eventually she had to go to her own bedroom. And it's just like this is just a big part of growing up. These things you used to do, you no longer do. And so maybe for kids, even younger kids, they can think back to those changes they've had in their lives, and that could be their resonance.
Yeah, that's a really good point, though, that it's for the parents as well, because they're ideally, usually, probably they're listening with their kids to the podcast while they go to sleep.
Yeah, co-listening is a major part of the show. And based off of feedback, I think it's about for every download, there's about 2.5 listeners.
Mhm.
So yeah, there's always a parent in there. Sometimes two parents and sometimes multiple kids.
Yeah. Well, I wanna play a quick clip of the podcast, so before we talk about the storytelling voice, people who may not know, hear what it is. So here's a quick clip.
Tonight, we're going on a mini adventure. Do you hear that? It's the sound of the sea breeze brushing over sand dunes and salt marshes.
So that's the storytelling voice, and I have to say it reminded me of, I don't have kids, so I don't watch a lot of, kids TV, but it reminded me of Will Ferrell in Elf, talking about, "And past the candy cane forest," and maybe a little bit of, Willy Wonka, the original Willy Wonka, Gene Wilder,
Oh,
his
I love that.
his his voice. Those were the 2 things it called to mind for me. And so as you were putting that voice together, that persona for Dougie Pickles, what were the primary language, um, levers that you were pulling on?
Well, it's evolved, and where it started is I wanted to address the listeners as a whole, so it's like a group. But then as I listen to the show, because this is something that I like to do with the shows that I have, is listen to an episode I haven't touched in months, and then it becomes new to me, and I almost become a listener myself. And I was listening to an episode where it was there's an introduction at the beginning where I say, "Hey, howdy, and hippopotamus high fives, my sleepy friend." It used to be sleepy friends, and I
Mhm.
was like, it's so much more personal when I address the listener directly. And so as part of that, it became the use of the second person. So the use of you. And again, listening back, it really felt like the second person is almost like this hand on your shoulder. It's immediate, it's intimate, and it's comforting. Um, so rather than like telling a story to a group of people, you're telling it to this one particular child who's listening. Even if there's three people in the room, they still feel like the story is being directed to them. And especially when you're winding down and it's kind of a vulnerable state, the second person almost feels like a bit of a safe bubble. You're warm, it's kind of safe, and you're ready for sleep. And every aspect of the show, if at any moment it feels like things are getting too excitable or there's some shift, it takes you out of that calming down, getting into the mode. And having used meditation apps, I know that how important that is because I've been taken out of a meditation because of a word choice or because of how something was said. So, again, this whole second person thing kind of gives me a way to gently guide emotions without lecturing. Um, like saying you might feel a little nervous sometimes, and that's okay. Instead of making it abstract, like, kids may feel this way. It's like, no, it's you who may feel this way sometimes. And there's always the bluey aspect of the show. There is a parallel between the animal we're learning about and some interesting fact and the kid's life. And that's where where I've had some parents message me who said they've cried during an episode. And for me, that tears are like it's the heart clapping because you've related to them in some way that has made them feel emotional to the point where tears come out. And the first episode that I tried this with was the baby sea turtles episode.
Mhm.
And the whole idea is that this little baby turtle is going out in the water, and one day it's going to come back to the same spot it was born and have children, and it's going to start all over again. And so the idea was that, you may be a baby sea turtle now, but so we're your grown-ups. And now look where they are. They're the big sea turtles. And then one day you'll be a big sea turtle. And I'm not spelling this out very well, but in the show it was really nice. It was a really nice little but yeah, it just goes back to that the use of the second person and feels much more one-on-one and reassuring and direct.
Yeah. I imagine, from having listened to it, I'm sure it's scripted, right? Like you're writing a script for
Yeah.
what you're doing, and how much revision are you doing? Like how much are you getting into the exact word choice and the rhythm and all that? Do you and actually, do you read it out loud before, as part of the editing process?
Yes, absolutely. Um, you kind of have to in any sort of podcast, or if you're reading a script and you're going to be acting in a movie, you got to read that out aloud, right? To hear it, to see what it sounds like. Where am I putting the emphasis? And so, coming from a writing background, where a lot of the writing is read. So I'm in advertising. And so, we're writing billboards, emails, all this other stuff. But when it comes to the radio scripts, that taught me a big lesson about reading that aloud, understanding the timing, the cadence, and the emotion that you want the person to feel by the time they're done. And so I take all those lessons into the podcasting world and read the script aloud. And I'm approaching by the time this comes out, it'll probably be almost episode 100. So I've had a lot of practice doing this. And the most challenging part of the editing process, I think, is sentence length.
Mhm.
And because what happens, and you may have experienced this before too, is sometimes the sentence is too long and you're out of wind. You're like, I don't know where to break. Okay, we have to restructure this. We need to, chop a bit here. And a lot of times, what I found the issue is you haven't gotten to the point quick enough in that sentence. And so it's like, okay, maybe I was being a little too verbose and I wanted to have some flowery language to build this thing up and do this thing. And it winds up getting you off track to the point where even the listener can be like, where are we going? What's so yeah. And I think that's an important lesson too, is about the musicality of your writing and the paragraph structure. And changing sentence length as you're going throughout a paragraph gives it sort of a sing-songy feel rather than, because I've written before in my early days where a lot of sentences had similar structure and similar length, and it just felt like a drum that was just tap, 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 and that becomes repetitive and boring after a while as a reader.
Mhm.
And especially when you're saying that stuff aloud, it becomes that much more apparent.
Yeah, that's one of the frequent changes I make when I have a new writer come on board who isn't used to writing for audio, before, is I do 2 things. I shorten the sentences typically, and I take out parentheticals because
Mm,
the asides, they're distracting, they don't make sense in audio, even though, we're all used to putting them in writing.
yeah.
Well, I wanna take a quick ad break, and when we come back, I wanna talk about, cozy critters, cozy comfort, the alliteration, and how that's working for you for the kids, and, we'll talk about, when kids grow out of this, appreciation for that storytelling voice. We'll be right back. And we're back with Doug Fraser of the Cozy Critters Kids Sleeping podcast. Doug, so it's Cozy Critters, and I noticed there's a lot of alliteration in the podcast. I'm sure that's intentional. What's your reasoning for putting in so much alliteration?
Alliteration just feels good, doesn't it? It's like a warm blanket for the brain. It's rhythmic, it's soothing, it's sort of gently musical in the way that varying sentence structure can be as well. Like phrases like wobbly waddling walrus or snug in a snowy snarl of seal pups. I had to read that. That's a tough one. They're fun to say and they stick. And then it's a funny thing that happens when you use alliteration, but you slow it down. So in the show, my pace is very slow. And then it starts to get slower at the end of some sentences. And then I'll take a break in between. And what happens is that alliteration starts to feel almost like a little song, a quiet little rhythm. In some ways, it can feel, especially if it's S sounds or plosives, it can feel like tapping rain. And
Hmm.
so when you combine that with the background music that happens during the episodes, it just feels like it almost, again, that warm blanket I think is a good metaphor for this. Um, but it also helps create vivid mental imagery, and it's sort of in a similar way that music is a shortcut to emotion, alliteration I think is a shortcut to sensation. And it also helps again kind of slow the pace down a little bit, which is good for bedtime. Um, and I don't try to use it too often because, like anything else, it can outstay its welcome. But I try to use it strategically to add things like texture, playfulness. Sometimes just a little poetic softness at the right moment goes a long way.
Hmm. And I also noticed that you use the show is in present tense. Is that something that's known to be good for storytelling for kids in particular too?
Yeah, I a big part of the show is about being present and being in the moment. And so if I used past tense about a story that, this sloth did this thing back in the day and we're going to tell you about it, there's a distance with that. And I think the present tense collapses that time between those things and allows us to stay present in the moment because what we're hearing happening is happening right now. And I think it's sort of similar to live sports. And when you're watching live sports happens, you're leaning in because this is happening right now. Whereas if you're watching a live sports event that already happened, that desire to be there in every moment kind of dissipates a little bit. Um,
Mhm.
so I think that immediacy of the present tense is especially helpful for bedtime, where the goal is to quiet those racing thoughts and keep that child grounded in the here and the now. But for the present tense, again, like if I'm saying, we float above the rainforest, and oh, look down there, there's this frog, there's this thing. It feels like it's happening in real time. So that barrier that can be created with past tense is broken down with present tense because we're here and we're now. And I think another point to that is we're going on an adventure, right? We're exploring, we're going to a place that is not their bedroom. We're going to South America. We're going to Africa. We're going to all these places around the world that they've likely never been. And so to say that we're doing that right now really heightens that immediacy of the moment. But also, for sleepy kids, especially, I think the present tense it has that immersion without being demanding. It sort of invites them and lets them drift from the here and now.
Mhm. And I noticed that you ask a very gentle question near the end. It's like, "Are you ready to go back home?" At the end of the story about the animals, and I thought that it's engaging, but not too engaging.
Yeah, I have, I think, 3 points throughout the show where I direct uh, directly ask the kids a question, and
Mhm.
it's are we ready to go? Are we ready to head home? And then there's a third one that tends to be something different. It may just happen at any point, um, but sometimes I'll dress them directly as my sleepy friend.
Mhm.
And the way that I do that at the beginning of the show, because I know they're still awake, is a little bit different from how I do it at the end of the show when I'm addressing them to ask if they're ready to go home. So there's this idea of we're slowing down by the end of the show. And sometimes I'll turn the volume down even a little bit during that part. So if they are asleep, they're not jolted awake because I'm asking something of them.
Right. And you said you think your oldest listener that you've heard from is 12, and that was one thing I was wondering as I was listening to it. It's like, at what age does that voice start not working anymore for the audience? Like, when do kids age out of liking that very children's storytelling voice? And then, do you know, is there a tween voice? Is there a teen voice that's different? I know as adults we still love a good audiobook narrator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to answer your second question first, I definitely think there's a voice for tweens. Um, and I think it can be the same voice. It's just we're changing the vocabulary we use. So we're having more adult vocabulary, but the content of the episode is more adult as well. So for example, in Cozy Critters, there's often talk of the mother and their child, their little baby, the mama kangaroo and her Joey. And that's because kids at that age have such a close connection with their parents. And they want to know that, hey, this is what happens in the wild. And there's this great connection with some animals. Obviously, not all animals have that connection. And they can relate that to their parents. So if I were to do a tween version of the show, I would probably have more details about what the animals eat. Because what happens in in the kids version of the show of Cozy Critters is sometimes they eat things and that can create a pretty nasty image in their head when they're trying to go to bed, right?
Mm,
And so that sort of content, um, there's an agreement I have with the listener that anytime you come in here, it's not just going to be a safe space, but it's going to be a space where the content is We don't talk about violence. We don't talk about anything that could disrupt your sleep or create negative imagery in your head.
Well, I have to say, when I was listening to your show to prepare, I'm not a child, but I did find I was starting to feel sleepy as I was listening to it. Was so comforting, and it was, like, just enough interesting information about the capybaras, to just keep me interested, but also soothe me along toward the end. It was great.
Thank you.
Uh, yeah, so, Doug Fraser, better known as Dougie Pickles, where can people find you and your show?
You can find everything that you need at cozycritterspodcast.com. I also am starting to create social videos for Cozy Critters. And so you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And the handle across all of those is just Cozy Critters Podcast.
Nice. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
And now for the Grammar Pelusians, we have a bonus episode. Thank you so much for your support. We're going to get Doug's book recommendations to add to your to be read pile. For everyone else, that's all. Thanks for listening.